Good afternoon, and welcome to Conversation with b.dude, author of 5 books on temperament, founder of a Leadership and Temperament forum on LinkedIn, an organization development consultant with 30 plus years, we'll just say 30 plus years experience in international development and leadership development, and a speaker, and also one of my oldest friends. And I'm Jim White. I also am a management consultant. I work in evidence-based leadership development initiatives in the federal government and the federal sector. We're happy to be here to talk about leadership, and we're happy to be here talking about temperament. And so again, welcome, Brad. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining all of us. And so Brad, how did you get into this business?
Thank you. Nice to be here, and hi to everybody that's on and those who will join us. After school in 1970, I joined the Peace Corps, and I was out in the Central Pacific of Micronesia in the Marshall Islands, and every year I was doing English teaching, and every summer, I would be asked to be involved with teacher training. So for several years in a row, I did teacher training and then got into training of new Peace Corps volunteers. And so I got into the world of training and did a lot of training throughout the Pacific and in the Middle East and in Africa. And that got me kind of looking for international consulting opportunities. I joined when you were with Westinghouse. I joined Westinghouse after a while, and in the mid '80s, and we did a lot of different kinds of consulting for, like the Navy and the Department of Energy and a variety of groups. I got into project management as well with a large project in the Middle East at the University of Jordan, and kind of kept going from there. I just continued to do it. I mean, it's one of those things that it's been just fascinating to be able to look at different kinds of clients and different situations in different industries and try to apply kind of OD and management principles to it.
And you and I met in '71, wasn't it, in the Marshall Islands? Yeah. Shameless, not plug, but sort of just full disclosure. We met in '71. And we were on an island a mile long and a half a mile wide for 3 months, training volunteers to go to outer islands of the Marshalls. And that's a story for another time, and it was great fun.
Exactly. It really was.
It was. So what is temperament?
Well, temperament is, I wish I had invented it, but unfortunately for me, it started like 2,500 years ago with Hippocrates. So I know you were around about that time, but I wasn't.
Yes, I was a child, but I was there. Right. Yeah.
And, it's the idea, Hippocrates, Hippocratic Oath, his observations of behavior. He tried to link behavior to wellness, trying to categorize the behaviors of folks and link it to, he called them humors, but of chemicals and blood in their system that was out of balance, he felt. So through thousands of years, temperament is basically looked on now as that inborn reaction that we have to emotions, our reactions to behaviors of others, and the speed at which we have those reactions. So it's kind of all about how we view the world. Our viewpoint of the world is influenced by our temperament. And the behaviors that we see in our workplace, how we make decisions, how we see the behaviors of others and our reaction to them. That's kind of what temperament is all about.
And it strikes me that is one of the major things that in talking about temperament that links it to leadership and leadership development is that understanding these lenses through which people, or these ways that people operate, if we as leaders or partners in life or whatever begin to understand these ways of looking at the world, it can help us be more effective in what we do and how we lead. Is that kind of the rationale that you're
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And in doing training, especially I think training for adults, adult leaders, Navy and energy and other government departments, and even into the private sector as well, What we found was that as they tried to get a better kind of understanding of their own role as leaders in their organizations, there are a number of models. I think there's over 500 kinds of temperament models, something like that. Everything from the Myers-Briggs type indicator to DISC to True Colors.
True Colors, right.
There's just a whole bunch of them. But what we found, Jim Harden was my and a good friend of mine. We did training. He was a client, actually, of ours when he was with the Navy.
The Navy, yeah.
And he recalls when we did temperament as part of a longer leadership course that he had a negative reaction to it and wanted to study more about it. He, the one eventually that came to me and said, you know, our feedback from folks is that they can't remember all of these models on temperament, but they're very interested in it because it's so practical and easy to understand. Why don't we write something that's a little bit more user friendly so they can have it? And so that's what got Jim and I into writing our first book together about temperament. We called it "What Makes You Tick and What Ticks You Off," and he coined the phrase "the basic elements of temperament" to describe the four major aspects of temperament and what we use today in our workshops, whether it's a single or half day on temperament only, or as part of a larger leadership course. So that's kind of how it evolved from being a portion of our leadership training into something bigger and more focused on temperament itself.
So that being said, so what are the temperaments? What are the basic elements that we're talking about for folks who are not aware of these models?
There are a number of names for them. And I was saying, if you look into it, some are by, there are four basic, we call them elements now of temperament. They've been named everything from different colors to different animals, different cultures. Right. Different cultures have different terms for those behaviors that they see. We use, and one of the problems that Jim pointed out when we first were working together on the book was that there is sometimes value associated with the names that are used. Do you want to be an eagle or do you want to be a fox? And there was some value put to those. And so, well, I'd rather be an eagle than a fox, but that's defeating the purpose of trying to get you thinking about behaviors and temperament. So we use earth, air, fire, and water as neutral terms that are very basic, and we call them the basic elements of temperament.
One of the things, building on what you said, is that a metaphor that we use around getting people to understand the basic features of, or the basic elements, is a metaphor of a clay pot. You need all four of the basic elements to make a clay pot. If you want something that is going to be able to, let's just take a look at what the four elements are. What are the characteristics? So we've got earth, air, fire, and water.
In no particular order. Remember, these are all inborn. We have all four of those temperaments within us. And they were in a hierarchical state upon our birth. So if we just take Earth for an example, as the first one to start with, Earths are the folks who are more traditional. They are the parental ones. They are the ones who look at the world and they see facts and realities, and they want to organize things and plan things. These are the folks that are interested in protecting. They're really protectors of their organizations, their families, their communities. You can extrapolate on with it. But for leaders, these are the ones really who take umbrage when they see people not following directions, skirting through rules and regulations, bending policies to fit their needs. That they have a negative reaction to that. So those are the Earths. And in general, in fact, based on MBTI figures, about 42% of the population of the world are Earths. If we take the air, and let me know if I'm going on too long with
No, this is fine.
Long time, of course. Heirs are the folks who view the world for meanings and possibilities, but they wish there were just no people kind of in their way to make that vision a reality. These are the folks who value competence above all. They're the ones who are into logic. They're the ones you turn in your report or your a paper to a leader who, a manager who is has a strong air temperament, and they're the ones who send it back saying this doesn't make sense, or this is illogical, or paragraph 2 really should be paragraph 8, because they don't see the logic to your argument. So you need to be really well prepared when you have an air leader that you're working with. So that's the earth, that's the air. And about airs, according to MBTI statistics, about 8% of the population are airs. Fires are the next one. They're very interesting. They are the ones who are, they have a lot of fun with life. They don't take things too seriously. They're troubleshooters. They look at the world the same way as the Earth's facts and realities. But where the Earth wants to organize and plan those facts and realities, the fires want to take those facts and realities, get more facts, and try to manipulate them to make things better. They have no problem cutting across rules, jumping over fences, cutting corners to make things happen. So as you might imagine, there's a little conflict sometimes when the Earth leader has a fire employee who does that. You know, for fire, the world is a chessboard. World is a chessboard, and we go to work every day. Chessboard's all different for them. They want to try different strategies because it's more fun. So that's kind of the fires. And there's about 40% of the world are fires. The last one are waters. Okay, the waters make up about 10% of the population. These are the people persons. They're the ones who look at the world the same way as the airs for meanings and possibilities, but they value it all through the impact on people. So where heirs would like to have that perfect world and they can design that vision of the future, but it just these people are in the way of making that happen. Waters feel that there is no meaning to what we are strategizing unless the people are taken into consideration.
So what is interesting about this as well, I find fascinating because, as you know, there's been current neuroscience research that validates these 4 categories, and from brain science or neurotransmitter dimension. And I think what I like about that is that we have perennial wisdoms that came from 450 BC that taught, and there have been at least 22 different 4-box categories around behavior throughout the years. And the current neuroscience from a totally different angle comes in and validates the behaviors that you've just described and validates them from a neuroscience perspective. And what I like about that is that for you and I work with a range of audiences who want to learn to be more effective leaders and be impactful, et cetera. And sometimes there's a resistance to some of this psychology that comes up, and it sounds like it's a little, a psychobabble-ish or a little soft. And what I like about it is that we can bring the soft and the historic and the perennial wisdoms together with the science, all in service of helping people be more effective as leaders or interpersonally or and even at home by understanding that this is a legitimate way of thinking about differences that lets us go beyond stereotypes.
They're born with all 4, and they're in a hierarchical order. And really that order is determined by some of the chemicals in our body. So for an example, Earth, these are folks that have a preponderance of serotonin in them. Now, we don't go into this in too much detail in our workshops because people, their eyes would glaze over. Where airs have the testosterone, more testosterone than the other 4 chemicals that basically deal with temperament. Fires are the dopamine, that's the feel-good chemicals. And so that's why they have to have action and they want to get immediate results and feeling good about themselves when they solve a problem very quickly. And waters have estrogen. Dr. Helen Fisher wrote a great book, Why Him, Why Her, where she talked to different folks. In fact, she interviewed like 40,000 people to start with, although she did a lot of work on with one of the dating websites that's for millions of people. And she found that that also the air temperament, which is testosterone advanced chemicals in you, was about 16% of the population, rather than the 8% that we generally subscribe to airs. So it's it's not a precise. I don't think it's precise science, but it's interesting that the scientific world does have ammunition to justify kind of their theories on this.
Yeah, one of the fun things about that is that when we're introducing temperament with groups, and we say about these studies, the why him, why her, the whole question is, why do people get together, and how do they match up, and are there patterns? And interestingly enough, there are patterns that in this population with eHarmony, and I forget the other group that were, those patterns had to do with air temperamented folks seem to gravitate and marry water temperamented folks. And if you look at some of so that's the intuitive function, NF and NT in the Myers-Briggs or the temperament, other temperament models, and that the earth folks do not, earth folks will gravitate more towards earth folks, and fire folks more towards fire folks. So now, of course, that's very general. However, it is backed up by, thousands, actually, several hundred thousand.
I do mention
interviews.
That in some of our workshop. It gets a big laugh
interviews.
If people think about their spouses or significant others, about that. But they also say, what about opposites attracting? And we talk about that as well, that's still, that happens. And,
sure.
And, I think Jim Harden used to say, well, that's true, except that the arguments get more intense when you have the opposite temperaments in effect. But I wanted to point out on that is that when we have these chemicals, we all have all four in us. We all have all four temperaments in us. And so we call the dominant one the one that you have the most of. So when we do our workshops, we kind of eventually get to a place where people, after learning about the four types of temperament, will self-select themselves. Now, MBTI and others have these incredible tests that, people can do, can write to tell them who they are, what temperament they are. But we find that people, have a tendency to put down what they think that the test is wants to hear or something like that, which kind of invalidates it. So we let them self-select and find that once they get to talking in like temperament-like groups about it, they either find that, I do fit really well here with my compadres who are in the same temperament, or they think I'm in the wrong group. I got to get out of here because I have nothing in common with them. So we do talk about then the dominant temperament, whichever one you are, as being your primary view of the world and your reactions to the behaviors of others. And your fourth one of the four, which one is the least like you? And we call that the shadow temperament. And that's the one that oftentimes gets us in the most trouble. And that's because when we see folks behave in that fourth temperament of ours, we typically have negative reactions to that behavior. So oftentimes we find that the people that leaders are having the most trouble with in their organizations are the ones with their shadow temperament. So part of our discussion in our workshops is talking about the shadow temperament and how we learn to perceive others with holding that temperament, because for them it's their dominant temperament, but for us it's our shadow temperament. So there's a real conflict. They view what they're doing as normal every day. That's how the world works. We view it as something's wrong there, typically, when we think about our shadow temperament. So we spend a lot of time in our workshops talking about how did we learn, well, not exactly how do we learn, but to be aware that we have learned these negative traits from the way we've grown up by people saying, oh, that's a bad guy, that's a bad behavior. Look how he's dressed. Look how she's dressed. Something's wrong with that person. That builds up that bias, that prejudice that we hold on some of the behaviors that we see. So it gets our workshops get into very good, deep discussions as we put people in different groups to talk about both their dominant temperament and then their shadow temperaments.
Very good. So let's talk about some of the venues in which we deliver temperament. You've talked about 1 and 2 and 3 day kinds of things. I know that in 1 or 2 days you can get to a certain degree of familiarity with temperament to be able to use them as a leader, as a lens to see things, etc. So what happens in 10 days? What do you do in 10 days, and where does temperament fit into that for long-term leadership development initiatives and large
organizations? The last 6 years,
kind of
I've been teaching a leadership course at Goddard Space Flight Center in just outside of DC for NASA. And it's a 12-day course spread out over 4 months. And we don't do temperament the first day with them. We do it the 5th day of the course with them. And what we found is that because they had generated a bet, and these are folks that don't work together all the time. It's amalgam from very many different departments and divisions coming together. Many don't know each other. So as they build up that rapport and they feel that the environment is safe for them to disclose their feelings about temperament and behaviors in the workplace and things like that, that by the 5th day together, they are much more open and receptive to getting feedback from others about their temperament, giving feedback to others about their challenges in dealing with a certain temperament. So I find that it's a much richer and deeper experience once they have groups that have a comfort level with each other.
Very good. One of the things in that vein that this points to is that in work that I do with my colleague Ken Nelson, who's online, Ken talks about, in terms of designing workshops, how do you design a workshop so that you can make sure that you maximize the amount of learning that takes place, mind, body, and spirit. And one of the first tenets of that is to create safety. And we know that if people aren't safe, they're not going to be learning. And lots of systems close down when they're not safe. And that really is what you're pointing to in terms of waiting a day or 2 or 3 in a 5-day workshop to introduce something that might be intimate. And safety comes at different times. I mean, some groups arrive safe and other groups arrive not so safe.
Montessori elementary school, 25 teachers all together from the same school. So they had that rapport already established. And I thought it was equally as useful and beneficial, and our conversations got very deep as well with them. So again, they knew each other, the comfort level was there, and they were willing to share that information. I'm guessing that if they were from 25 different schools all coming together to chat about temperament, would have had the conversation that would not have been as deep and rich as it was with that group.
That's deep. Yes. Very good. Well, very good. Well, I want to, if it's all right, I'd like to unlock the seat and see if anybody in the audience would like to come up and be on screen and chat with us as well.
About the application of temperament, some people ask, well, maybe that's not good for my organization. I think it's good for any kind of organization. As I said, I do temperament with scientists and engineers and administrative staff at NASA. I've done temperament with a whole group of teachers. We have done it with Navy folks as well. Customs and Border Patrol. When I was, I did some work in Brownsville. We did temperament with them. It's been well received, no matter where we have done it, and we try to tailor it to the needs of that particular industry. I know that I've been writing some things lately on LinkedIn about different industries, HR folks, for an example, which has more obvious use of temperament since they're involved with training and usually organizational development in their work sites. but also with the hospitality industry, dealing with customer service and sales even. The whole idea of getting to know your customer better, getting to know that we have customers who are dominant Earths, who might want to see a more traditional presentation, and then being able to think about it and going away before making a decision. You might have fires who are ready to make a decision right there, try to apply it, but they may ask you questions about, can we change your product to fit our particular needs, and how would we do that kind of in real time? And so then you have waters who don't want to be sold right away. They want to develop that relationship to make sure they trust. There's a trust aspect before they would buy anything. So I think there's application, again, to a lot of different kinds of industries.
Sure.
You have done some work in Kripalu with Ken using.
Yes. And Ken gets on. We'll can start talking about. Yes, I work with Ken and Leslie and David Ronca, and I do a workshop at Kripalu Yoga and Health Center, and it's on facilitating transformational workshops. There are 3 different sessions. And one of the things that's going on there is that folks come in and they want to learn how to design and facilitate workshops that have a mind-body component. And we believe that the mind-body component in leadership workshops helps for transformation. And so we are working with them on how to do that. We use temperament as a lens through which to look at how, once they know what they want to be teaching, so they can write copy to address the needs of their audiences. Because many times say we're heavily water in our orientation, and we design a workshop that we think is really very, very good and effective, and we take a look at it from the lens of air and fire and earth, we may see that our copy does not support getting a group interested in coming to our workshop, because the language that we're using only addresses one kind of temperament cluster. So basically, it's a lens to step back and say, what else do I need to be paying attention to if I want to broaden my audience? So that's how we apply it up there.
Well, and that has application to a lot of different things. For HR professionals involved with hiring, for an example, what we have found, many of us involved with temperament and doing OD, is that companies hire people that are like themselves quite a bit. So for an example, a bank, wants to hire, has a spot open. They won't look at their organization and say, we are an earth, organizations have temperament too. You can kind of tell. So a bank, for an example, that has rules, processes, procedures that you have to follow to be successful. So they end up trying to hire earths a lot. And it could be that what they really need are some waters, because they don't have very good customer relationships. Now, I don't know that's changing. I'm trying to generalize to show the differences there. So companies, rather than hiring people just like everybody else in your organization, you need to be able to kind of analyze where your challenges are, where your gaps are, I think, in temperament. It's not the only factor in hiring, but it certainly should be considered in the type of questions that you're asking of new hires, and the kinds of people that you're looking for. You take that to leadership, that same kind of concept on leadership. And, I'm sure we've all dealt with managers or supervisors or leaders who said, this is me, and so I can't change, and this is the way it is in this organization.
There he is.
Hey.
Got you. Hey, brother, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Oh, very good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm really enjoying.
Can you see? Oh, very good. This is Brad. Ken? Brad.
Nice to meet you, Brad.
Nice to meet you.
I've been following this.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, it's fascinating. And Jim, thank you for inviting me to get on. And, as Jim was talking about a moment ago, we have been using for our transformational workshops programs the concept that there are twin roles for the leader. One is a content designer, instructor, teacher, and in that way we can use these elements, these 4 elements, in a way to design like like big picture design, the air quality, and then have a very sequenced earth, practical, straightforward design with a connection, water connection to each other. And then finally, the fire, the action plan that goes at the very end. So that's the leader, the teacher side of things. And then the other side is the facilitator. And the facilitator for group dynamics, I find this even more valuable because, as you say, you can really kind of, in a sense, really understand why people are making the decisions they do and how to perhaps intervene in such a way that you can be much more effective and impactful in using this theory in very practical interventions. Mm-hmm. So it's a fascinating both theory and in practical usage. So I'm very happy to be using it with Jim, and thank you, Brad, for delineating it so carefully.
Sure. I think as you came on, I was just adding to kind of that thought about leaders who typically, follow the golden rule, oftentimes that treat everybody like I want to be treated. So mm-hmm. If I'm a water, then I'm going to treat everybody like a water. But we have to remember that we've got 3 other temperaments that are out there. So if you're treating that earth or that air like a water, you're going to miss something because that air wants more data. You're trying to be, working on relationships, but what they really want are data. And the earth person wants to know, how is this helping our organization grow? Are we by doing this, is this putting our organization in danger? Whether it's our reputation or it's our financial environment or our economics. So it's, more of the, I know in the first book that we did, Jim Harden and I talked about more of the platinum rule, where you want to treat people the way they want to be treated. And you can't be all things to all people because people will see through that, but you're at least more aware than you once were that there are other people out there with different kinds of temperament that need different things from you as the leader.
May I ask a question about, there's been some recent, let's say, some talk about the usefulness of the types of learners. So I'm not sure how this relates exactly to the temperaments, but let's say there are visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners. Can you, and so some of this has been, the notion of these types of learners has been brought to question as to whether it's valid. So can you talk about that for as far as learning situations? What would your response be to that?
I don't profess to know too much about it. I mean, the learners that I have in my sessions, mine is platform training typically with them. So it's a face-to-face. What I found for those doing online learning is that the waters that I've dealt with have a hard time with it sometimes because there's no relationship established with somebody else, and that's important for them. So the face-to-face stuff seems to be more important for the water temperament than some of the others. Airs, on the other hand, really enjoy online. They don't have to deal with all this stuff, dealing with all these other people and their opinions, and having to Brad to put me in a small group over here, and I'm supposed to be sharing my information. Give it to me online. Give me the data. Let me explore it on my own time. That's a good time for an air learner, from my perspective. I think the earth can go either way from my perspective. And fires like it all. I think fires enjoy the interface, but they also enjoy working on their own. Fires are interesting folks because they see the joy in doing it a lot of different ways. In fact, boredom is their worst enemy. So no matter what you do with them, they're going to be bored after a certain amount of time and want to change anyway. So it's a challenge, I think for organizations, especially I think learning organizations today that are making the shift to total online learning. I think there's some challenges with the type of learner that they will have some success with. And I acknowledge that the platform face-to-face kind of training is still expensive, but I think there's still a big payoff for that, if that helps. Jim, how you feel about it?
Well, I think it's interesting. In the kinesthetic, auditory, visual learning array, I think they're whether they're absolutely true or not. I think it's like temperament. We're not all just air. We're not all just one. And I think from a learning perspective, we're not all just auditory versus visual, etc. We may have preferences. And I think if we look at temperament and the kinesthetic, that array, as preferences and leanings, that what you do tries to consider all of it. And I think at Kripalu, in the work that we're doing up there, that it by design is addressing all of those things. There are things that people hear about from us and from each other. There are things that certainly people experience kinesthetically, because it is a mind-body experience for folks, and they are getting engaged in different ways. And auditorially, they hear, and they have kinesthetic experiences in terms of what they experience with each other, and also physically as well as interactively. And visually, there are visual prompts. So as a way, it's kind of like thinking about it as a checklist. I would say. So are we paying, like we used to do with the old 5 teaching learning principles back in Micronesia days? Does it have appropriate practice and perceived purpose and all of that stuff? So as a checklist for our work at Kripalu, when we're doing copy, are we appealing to earth and air and fire and water? Are our activities kinesthetic, auditory, and visual? So it's a checklist to make sure that we may not know who they are, but if we cover all of our bases, may come closer to being effective with what we do with it. That's a way. That's a thought about it.
Nicely put. Yeah.
Ken, we just did a survey. They seem to enjoy the temperament part of what was done a couple of weeks ago. That sounds like a team put this together. I mean, doing the manual, doing the activity, getting it to integrate, getting it so it's is a team effort up there, and it seems to work so far.
Indeed,
anyway.
We did a follow-up, a post-workshop evaluation to see how people enjoyed different aspects of the program. And one of the things they really enjoyed was the elements, and I think they enjoyed learning about themselves and about one another, certainly from the point of view of the workshop leader, how you respond to people and how your behavior and your way of viewing the world intersects and the way you interact with other people. So I think it was one of the most effective pieces of the workshop, the use of the 4 elements for these leaders. One said that perhaps it wasn't so helpful in terms of designing the program copy. In other words, writing your copy, your description of your workshop. They weren't quite convinced if that's totally the very best way to use the elements. But as I said earlier, there's so many different ways that you can use the elements, both in the group process, the group dynamics side as a facilitator, and as a designer, making sure that the workshop design has these elements balanced. So would you say anything about the copy, writing descriptions?
Did I say anything about it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, in terms of writing copy, that was the only comment that was less than enthusiastic in terms of how one writes.
What's the context for that of writing copy? Tell us that.
Well,
so what we do is go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah,
you can do it.
Okay. Basically, we give folks the 4 elements and give them engaged in it, understanding the way we do in other situations, and then we have them embody it. And so they dance it. So that's not something we necessarily do at Goddard, but we certainly can do it at Kripalu, and it works very, very nicely. So then they've been working prior to that activity, they've been working on what's the workshop that they have in them? What's the workshop that they are wanting to design to take out to the world? That's why they're there, most of them. And so we ask them to take those ideas after they've heard the basic elements and come up with a title and a tag and a blurb as much as they can around what their workshop is going to be. And so we give them a checklist of, here, take a look at your copy, share it with your friends, and make sure if you want earth and air and fire and water groups that you're appealing to, this is a way to make sure that you're making the right connections with the verbiage of it. So that's the way we use it.
It's another way, it sounds like, of acknowledging your audience, that it's not just from your perspective, it's all the other temperaments. You should anticipate that they're all there at all times. So that needs to go into your thinking about how you're making presentations or writing things.
Good point.
Yeah, I gotcha. Good.
One of the things that's interesting that while we have you here, Brad, with temperament and your international work, I mean, some folks can step back and take a look. I'll just go back a bit and say, this, temperament stuff is very nice. I mean, it's all very well and good. Is it just uniquely American? And we can say, well, the neuroscience says it should be everywhere. Now, you've had the last 2 years, you've had on the ground experience in the South Pacific, putting temperament workshops on for different audiences. Right. So what's been your experience?
Well, I'm working with a executive leadership development program that is sponsored by Department of Interior for government officials of throughout the South Pacific. It includes Guam and American Samoa and Saipan, Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, and then across the Pacific, where I used to run around with Peace Corps from the Marshall Islands to Palau. And there's about 25 get picked to go through a leadership course, leadership course, and I've done temperament with them. And then I visited every island site, every major island site as well, doing temperament workshops over the last couple of years. And sure enough, I found that reactions are similar. And we've got groups, 4 groups are there a lot. I did find in some island groups that, in our discussion, it came up. What happens when you're from let's say you're born a fire, and you are born into a culture that is really more earth, much more hierarchical, more regimented. Don't expect you to kind of go crazy, but to follow the rules. There may be a religious aspect to it that you're expected to follow as well. And so after going through a presentation on temperament, would somebody who goes through that, would they say, I'm a fire, or would they say, I'm an earth, because that's what I should be? And that's really no different than filling out the MBTI test, in my inventory, in my opinion, and trying to jot down things that you think makes you a better person or something. So that did come up as we started to talk and challenge people. Why are you in this group? Especially when they got feedback from others in the group that they knew, who said, you're not in this group, you should be over in that group. And that got into an argument, a discussion about that. And it's coming to grips with who are, they're no different in Palau than they were in at Goddard Space Flight Center, with an engineer. I mean, the same challenge. How honest do you want to be? How self-aware are you? But since out in the Pacific, those tiny islands, they know each other since, day one. And they would give each other a lot of good feedback there. But it's been great to do that. And another nice thing about it, and it happens everywhere with the temperament, they start using the vocabulary. And so even, months later, when we're doing follow-up on another leadership topic, somebody will say, oh, that's just the Earth's opinion on that one. And everybody will laugh because they're starting to use those terms. Or, oh, never mind, that's just a fire talking. And everybody, or they'll take pride in it because I care for you because I'm a water. What about that? And they all laugh, So it's fun how they can play with it. I think that's how you internalize and embed the concept is when you can play with it, and it's not a good or bad. It's like, hey, we're all everything. But it's been great to do that.
And the interesting thing is that can happen in 2 hours.
Yeah, it can.
In a workshop in 2 hours. Right. That kind of connection can be built that they will start to play with it like
That's
that.
That's true.
Well, this typography is really easy to learn for certain because, for example, in yoga we have Ayurveda, we have 5 elements, and in the Chinese system you also have 5 elements. But these 4 make a lot of sense because they're very simple, easy to learn, and you can pick them up and use them right away. At Kripalu, for example, we would self-identify, and about 80% would be identified as water.
Yeah.
So I wonder why.
but I'm surprised to see that it was at 10% worldwide. That's curious.
Yeah. Well, 10% on that. But it's like when Dr. Fisher did her work on 40,000 people, she found that waters were more like 29%. So,
interesting.
You can generalize. To me, it's not a big deal because, for an example, in government, my experience working with government employees for many, many, many years is that government kills fires. The fire personality doesn't last long in government positions because they feel they're bored. They're too restrictive, and they look for other options. So it kind of depends on, your group. I mean, we do at NASA, we have a lot of scientists and engineers, so we do have a lot of airs and a lot of earths that often are the biggest groups when we do that. But so it kind of depends, I think, on, I can't exactly remember. I think with teachers, there were a lot of earths. I think most, in fact, that's what I think we've learned that is that most teachers are earths. Stay within the lines. The lines are your friend. Raise your hand before you go. I mean, that's one of the problems that kids have today. The fire child who acts up and is given Ritalin to calm down when it's really a temperament difference that's going on. So,
one of the things that strikes me about this also is that, and I think this comes out when we're working at Kripalu because of the nature of the emphasis there on not only distinctions but connections and connection, mm-hmm. and that is in many cases, regardless of whether you're heavily earth, air, or fire, or water, when you get into certain kinds of situations, it's not that you leave your primary temperament at all. It's just that you can begin to experience that aspect of yourself that is more shadow-like in normal circumstances. When you connect, when you communicate, when you get people caring about you, when you come up with a common vision about what you're doing, people will work within their temperament and also explore other ways of being. And so one of those explorations of taking the elements and turning it into a clay pot is those transformational workshops are as it were, the vessel for which the temperaments can come together and find what they have in common as well as what they have that is different. Yeah. And because of that, I believe is part of the reason that it's transformational is because all of a sudden I'm a high earth, as it were, and I discover that there's a part of me that is water that wants to come out a bit, but I'm never going to be water. But there's a part of me that is water, and that needs to be honored. And so that's my thinking. What do you think, Ken? Does that make sense from what we're doing up there?
Absolutely. We're planning a workshop for October, which is on the group dynamics, the facilitating side of the workshop leader. And I think this, knowing your dominant element and knowing your shadow element would be, equally as important because what's bound to jump up and bite you is going to be the shadow part that you haven't really owned, and you're you're not comfortable with,
Right.
and you don't especially want to show that. So getting to know the shadow side is just really important for any kind of deep work that you're doing with a group.
Yeah, it's a complex thing. I know we don't have much time left, but I know that there's a duality of the shadow, in addition to, where we project our blame and bias on others. And Jung says that's so that we don't think of ourselves as being a bad person. So we throw it on our baggage on other people. But the duality also would be that there are undiscovered talents that we have. It's like Jim was saying, that water needs to come out, whether it's some kind of expression, maybe it's to perform, to lead a group, who knows what that is. But we also in our workshops talk about what undiscovered talents do you have. That's part of your shadow too. You've been pushing it down. You thought about it as a child, you haven't looked at it again. So we want to bring that out.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we're about out of time. And I'd like, Brad, how do we get in touch with you? How do people watching get in touch, find out more about temperament, your books, plus your LinkedIn work?
Yeah, well, we have a new LinkedIn. Let's talk about that first. LinkedIn group is called the Temperament and Leadership Network. Just got started. I hope everybody listening will join in. Again, it's to do more discussions like this, share experiences on that. My LinkedIn page is right there with it, I guess. And I've got about 16 different articles up there now, and a lot of it is descriptors of application of temperament in a variety of situations. Our website that Jim Harden and I did for our first book, let me point that out. Our first book was What Makes You Tick and What Ticks You Off. That can be, and also we've got a couple of really cute products that we use. We've got cards, one for each of the temperaments. On one side, it's your dominant kind of behaviors, and on the other side are your shadow behaviors that you need to be aware of. We find many of our people take these cards with them to meetings and kind of refer to it so they know what's going on. And I know that Jim has used, we also have these Legos, 4 Lego sets that are great to being on your desk to say, today I need to work more on my fire, as an example. We have also.
Well, an example of how that worked is that some years ago, Jim Harden, our deceased colleague, was doing work at UMBC, which I started working at last year. I went into a meeting with one of the deans, and I saw those Legos on the desk. Yeah. And that allowed us to start a conversation about how she found those, which linked us together with the temperament, which was a very nice thing. And the other thing is that some graduates of a recent course have them on their desk, and they use them as conversation starters, because you walk in and you say, what the heck is that?
Exactly.
And now you have an opportunity to connect. So that's how that's been used.
The website for that, we just followed our book. And so we said that's, www.whatmakesyoutickandwhatticksyouoff.com. And you can order these things off of that. And it's a lot of fun, and people have really enjoyed using them. And Twitter, I'm doing a Twitter account as well every day, just about every day, that reinforces of what it means to be dominant earth or dominant air, dominant water, dominant fire. So it's just a lot of fun stuff that we're trying to have folks look at. We're still doing our workshops, and people still get a hold of me, and we'd love to do longer courses with them and incorporate temperament concepts as well. So listen, I really appreciate the time today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Good to see everybody again. We'll be in touch soon. So we're signing off. And